one of the first prices you pay, I feel like, as a missionary is knowing that you cannot please everybody.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you can't be a people pleaser because you're going to upset your family. You're going to upset close friends. You're going to upset even family members, maybe. I mean, immediate family members.
Right. Hi, friends. Thriving in Japan.
Yep.
This is a discussion between friends about what it takes or what it's taken over the years to build a deep foundation in God, to be able to remain in His abundant life. We hope that these discussions can be useful and a blessing to people. We want to be as real and authentic as possible. The highs and the lows of living in a foreign culture. But that's just life in general. It says in the Word that we are sojourners, that our citizenship is in heaven. And so even if we're in our home country and in our hometown, it's like that's not where we really belong. We belong in heaven, and because of that, there's certain things that we go through and stresses and trials and all sorts of things. And we have to find a way to navigate those things. So we'd like to just continue that discussion today.
Yep.
Have my friend with me, Joe.
Hey.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me here. My name is Joe Choi, and my family and I originally came to Japan from San Diego about 3 years ago, and we somehow knew each other. Jeff, you and I knew each other through Chuck and Kelly Graft.
That's right.
But we never officially got to actually meet one another and hang out until we moved closer to this area.
That's right.
Yeah, and so we lived in Osaka for 2 years, and now we live close by in Nishinomiya.
Right.
Yeah, Nishinomiya-shi, so...
That's right. I heard about you guys through Chuck and Kelly or someone else as well. You'd been in Redding, California.
Yep.
Working with the church.
Yeah.
There, and then had moved to Japan. So tell us a little bit of that. So why did you come to Japan? How did you feel God leading you here?
So I have actually never been to a foreign country besides Mexico and Canada.
Yeah.
And, well, when I was in fourth grade on a family trip to South Korea, and pretty much never for missions. And so I actually felt called to inner city missions when I was in college, and I lived in this area called New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I was the first and maybe only Asian person many of these people ever met in their life. Yeah.
New Jersey, you're talking, is that East Coast America, right?
East Coast, yeah.
Right next to...
Yeah, so here you have
York.
College Avenue, and you go down 4 blocks deeper into New Brunswick. And yeah, the common question I would get asked often by the children would be, or even some adults would be, "Are you Latino?" And I was like, "No, not Latino."
That's crazy. It's like...
You're not black? No. What are you?
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, how far away are you from
far.
New York City? I mean...
very close. Half an hour away driving. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy how cultures can be so sort of compartmentalized almost.
Totally. And so, I felt called there to be a teacher there, to help in the inner city. I actually moved there. It's a pretty dangerous area. And I helped with a church plant there. And so I felt called... that was the first time I felt called to missions, but it was local missions.
Yep.
But
it's totally foreign culture, isn't it? In that sense.
Fast forwarding many years, I met my wife, had children, was a pastor in San Diego, and that was the second time in my life I felt a call to go to a specific place. To do ministry, and
it came as quite a surprise, right? I remember you mentioning that you were like doing really quite well.
Yes.
Regarding ministry, everything was sort of chugging along. Quite well.
Yeah, I was the what do you call it? Director for the San Diego Burn, which is like a prayer movement.
Yeah.
And so we were seeing so many amazing things happening with church unity in San Diego County. So I was working with maybe 25 to 30 churches, which is unheard of. and doing worship events together and praying together for the region, for the city, and even at the church where I was a pastor, we were seeing so much fruit and breakthrough. It was
Yep.
an exciting time, and everybody was just doing great. And then in the midst of all of that, I was just at the church one day, and I felt like it was like an audible voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not happened often in my life, and I felt like God just told me, like, great job, Joe. And at the time, I was, I think, tuning the drum set or just getting it ready for Sunday.
Yep.
And I was like, whoa, it's like God must care about drums. And I was like, wow, this is important. And then, but in my heart, I knew it was like a deeper good job. It was like this season is finished.
Yeah.
Great job. And but I kept it in my heart. I didn't want to tell my wife because everything was going great. My wife was also doing really well at her job there.
Yeah.
And my wife came home, I think that day or the next day, and said, my wife, oh yeah, I'll just say Christina. My wife's name's Christina. Christina said, Joe, things are going great, right? I'm like, yeah. Okay, so weird, but I felt like God told me today that if we don't obey what he's calling us to do, we're going to all slowly feel like we're dying on the inside.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a Selah.
Yeah. And I just went,
Wow.
oh, okay. And I told her that I didn't want to tell her what I heard God say to me the other day, but this is what he said. And she said, automatically, what are you talking about? What are we going to do? Like, what do you mean? Like, where would we go? And what do we do for job? What do we do for the kids? Like, where do we, what? There's so many life questions.
Sure.
And I said, I have no idea, but I felt like God said that the season's, like, we did great, but there's something new he wants us to
Right.
do.
So at this time, you didn't actually have a specific
No.
Japan thing. It was more
But
just a feeling of shift.
yeah, but I told her, rather than trying to talk about what we think it should be, let's go pray on our own. So I went somewhere to pray. She went somewhere to pray. And then when I came out and I talked to her, I said, oh, I really feel like God told me where we're supposed to go. And my wife, who's always been a missionary and had a missionary heart, she's been to so many countries, and her family did missions in the Amazon River in Brazil for many years.
Yep.
So she was always waiting for me, our whole marriage, to receive a call for missions. But I was always Mr. U.S. domestic man. Like, things are awesome here. Things are. I don't feel called to go to a foreign nation. So here I was, though, telling her, yeah, I really feel like we're supposed to go to Japan. And she said, what? Really? And I said, what about you? And she said, well, I didn't expect you to say that, but God told me Japan as well. And I was like, whoa. And I was like, why do you think Japan? And then we started swerving back into, again, human logic. Well, maybe it's because we're doing a lot of work in San Diego with the veterans and with people with PTSD and people who struggle with anxiety and depression.
Yep.
Maybe he's calling us to go help people who struggle with depression because they have a high suicide rate,
Right, right.
supposedly. So we Googled it, but South Korea came up higher with suicide rate. And Christina's like, oh, if that's why God's sending us there, we should just go to South Korea. You speak Korean, you know a lot about the culture, you have family and friends there. We could have like a very, many doors could open up for us there. It sounds way more reasonable. Logical.
Yeah, yeah.
So we went to pray again, and I'm so sorry. I was like, I really feel like it's not South Korea. It's Japan. And she said, yeah, I feel the same way.
Wow.
And then we both asked each other, do you know anyone in Japan? And she spent a year in Japan doing missions.
Right. Yeah.
But she in her heart didn't feel like she was supposed to reach out to the old church out in Gamagori.
Right.
So, and I told her the only person that I know I met for 5 minutes at a Burn conference. I went to Virginia Beach to this thing called the Leaders Summit, where the leaders come, and I was playing piano some worship sets, and someone came up to me and said, "Hi, my name is Masa, and I'm from Osaka. What's your name?" I told him my name's Joe, and I told him thank you so much for just being a house of prayer in Osaka.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your worship, and we exchanged Facebook
Yeah. Yeah.
contact, and I never talked to him again after that. So it was 5 minutes.
Right.
So I told Christina, I said, honestly, I don't know anyone except for this one person who I met. He's really cool, but I don't know him at all.
Right.
I just met him. He's from Osaka. I can try reaching out to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anything. I didn't know anything about Japanese culture.
Sure.
So just being American and just optimistic, thinking everything works out, I was like, yeah, I'll give him a call. And that itself was a miracle because Masa was very receptive. I said, "Do you remember me from the summit? This is Joe." He's like, "Oh yeah, I remember. How you doing?" And I said, "My family and I feel called to move to Japan long term. We just don't know how to get there. Do you know of any people hiring for jobs or helping with visas?" And he just was processing it all.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll ask around,
Yeah.
you know. And later on, Masa told me, he said, to tell you the truth, I was just being polite. I didn't ask anybody after I hung up. I just didn't know what to say to you.
Yeah.
But what happened was, we didn't know, but Masa actually worked at a school, and after he got off the phone with us, he just went back to work and doing what he normally does. He didn't like search the internet or start calling people. He was just went back to normal life. But his boss came up to him and said, "Masa, you need to pray. Everyone, we all have to pray. We had 2 teachers that were supposed to come and teach at the school, and they just last minute didn't work out.
Right.
We don't know what to do, but we have to find 2 people to fill in these slots, and we have no idea where to find them.
Right.
So let's pray." And Masa just looked at her and said, "Oh, I actually might know of 2 people that can come." And they're like, "What?" And so Masa connected us with his boss, and we ended up talking, and we ended up coming to Japan.
Wow. So time frame, you from the prayer closet moment, Japan, chatting with Christina, and then actually arriving in Japan, how many weeks, months?
It was about 5 months because my church in San Diego, even though we heard from God, they had a really hard time. They blessed us as far as receiving a call from God.
Sure.
But they really did not want us to go.
Yeah.
And so rather than giving them like a 2-week notice, I gave them about a 4 or 5 month notice. To help find someone to replace me. And I see. And I talked to the leader of the burn and told him that I would find someone else to take over as director for the burn. And then there's just so many relationships that we had to kind of help transition out because I was just really involved in a lot of ministry stuff. So that part was tough, and a lot of people were super unhappy.
I think that's quite a common missionary experience. Do you think?
I think that's one of the first prices you pay, I feel like, as a missionary, is knowing that you cannot please everybody.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you can't be a people pleaser because you're going to upset your family. You're going to upset close friends. You're going to upset even family members, maybe. I mean, immediate family members.
Right. And a lot of them are believers, of course.
Oh, all believers.
Yeah.
Most
and
of
so,
them,
And so they, that's even harder because you're like, okay, well, we feel like we're hearing from God, but you...
Yeah. Ironically, at the church staff meeting, they said, "Joe, we've been praying every week almost as a staff that God would raise a family from our church to go to the mission field," because that we were praying for that. We just thought it would be, a family in the church that we would send out and bless. We didn't think it'd be someone from the staff.
Right.
So it was really ironic. They're like, "God answered our prayers, but we don't know how we feel about it." So,
yeah, a little bit of tension. It's also...
Yeah.
It's also, I think, your experience of having everything sort of together and going well, and then feeling the call to come to Japan.
Yeah.
That can be I think quite a few people have that experience. They've sacrificed quite a bit, like careers.
Yeah.
Could have gone into business, could have gone, not necessarily just ministry things, could have gone into business, could have gone into the family business, maybe even.
Yeah.
And then they've like, no, I'm going to give up all that security to do this, you know?
Yeah. And, even for our kids, we had just got annual membership to the San Diego Zoo. It's a
Yeah.
world famous zoo. And we lived in this place called Sunset Cliffs in Ocean Beach, OB. And it's
I've been to Ocean Beach.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
We stayed in a condominium
No
for
way.
a holiday with
Whoa.
my wife's family.
Wow, what in the world?
Beautiful ocean. We're right on the beach.
That's where we lived.
Really? You lived there?
We
Oh.
lived on the beach.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And we would I remember one time, like all the kids, they were all little at the time, and they all had their bath and they were all ready to go to bed. And it's like beautiful sunset. It's like, oh, okay, one more time to the beach. And
Yeah.
that was it. Like 5 minutes at the beach, and they're covered with sand.
Yeah,
and stuff
that was
again.
our life.
Wow.
Even our church had surf showers because all the pastors they would surf.
Right.
So you have wetsuits hanging outside the church
That's-
office.
oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, so that's where I lived, and so even for our kids, it was a tough transition going from paradise really to and things going well, them thriving in their schools, top of their class in their schools, to going to a foreign country in a foreign language school and being at the bottom of their class.
Yeah.
And sticking out as just totally sticking out.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean that's of course the road or the path that Jesus promised a lot of us. You know, you're
Yeah.
giving up this for this, but this is an eternal thing. But obviously, we're still battling with the world that we're the physical, tangible, financial world that's around. How did you process that? I mean, I know you get on the ground in Japan, and you guys walked into a fairly good situation, right?
Yeah,
you had
it was
housing.
excellent
job.
situation. It was totally God. We didn't just find a job. We found a great church family and great people. Still friends with them, and
Yep.
probably gonna see them in a little bit. And so, yeah, it was totally God. And for us, it wasn't about the opportunity or the logistics. It was about obedience.
Absolutely.
And I feel like if obedience is your reward, if God Himself if His presence is your reward, then all these other things that scream for your attention, like I don't know,
Those thoughts of what you gave up.
security or
Yeah, yeah,
convenience, they really are very empty.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
because if you think about building a house upon those foundations, they just seem very empty.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with convenience and security, but
Yeah.
if that's what you're building your house upon rather than
Right.
upon Christ, we know that would just be, like Christina said, if we don't obey the Lord, we're going to feel like we're dying on the inside.
Sure.
I would have felt like it would have been like a rotting house on a bad foundation.
Right.
We would have been living in paradise, but feeling like we're dying.
Sure.
So we obeyed the call, and we involved our children in the decision. They also felt like we were supposed to do this, so we all came together, and it's been 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell us about the first 3-4 months. I know that's like, depending on the person, of course, but that can be a difficult time for the first while. What were some of the personal, I guess, disciplines and mechanisms, the things and how you guard your heart that you process that transition, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think something that was really helpful was the school that we ended up coming to teach at was connected to a church.
Yep.
In that church, the pastors told us, so about every single person who's come here, they hit this 4-month mark.
Yeah.
And they kind of go crazy. But if you can get past that 4-month mark, you're usually gonna be all right.
Right.
But if you can't, just know it happens to everybody.
Interesting.
And
it's actually, I've never heard the actual 4-month
Yeah,
period. But
they said it was when the novelty wears off of it being
the honeymoon period.
Yeah, of it being an exciting new place, and then you just start realizing, oh wow, I can't escape this. I'm in a foreign country. I'm a foreigner, and everything is foreign.
Yeah.
Some people panic and they kind of melt down.
Sure.
And so I remember them telling that to us and us thinking, oh, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, other people maybe, but we're good. But sure enough, when it came to that moment, to that point of time, yeah, it was very psychological, very intense. We were like, what did we do? What are we doing? Because, just simple luxuries like being able to read street signs, being able to read a flyer hanging at the park, or being able to have a conversation at the grocery store, small chat, all those are absent now. And you just have yourself, your Google Translate app, and the little Japanese you're learning, and anyone like your family member or native speaker close to you. That's it as far as community. So, yeah, it can be very intense. So, so when that happened, I remember I used to have to take long walks by myself. And I used to tell Christina, I used to tell her, oh, I'm kind of having a hard time. I think I need to go for a long prayer walk and just talk to God. And I remember doing that often. I even remember it raining, downpour raining.
Sure.
And I had forgotten an umbrella. But I was getting so much out of my time walking with God. I didn't want to go back to the house. I was walking around drenched in rain, and people were staring at me like I was crazy. But I was healing. I was getting energized. I was getting refreshed by God. So
I think that's even symbolic there. I've found that obviously over 27 years, it's the same thing. And I guess there is these moments and periods, the 4-month period as well. But and the willingness, I think that's almost symbolic, the willingness to it's raining, I haven't got an umbrella, but I'm going to go out because I need this perspective shift. I just need to make this change. And definitely. Whatever the cost is. I find myself now, of course, I take an umbrella. But on a rainy day, often I was planning on going for a walk this morning. It's raining. I'll still go. It's cold. I'll still go. Because I know I need to.
Yeah, because it's not about it looking ideal, like the conditions look ideal. It's more like something in your heart. Is there's something understood because of your history with God. That no, I need to do this. I need to go out there.
Right.
Yeah, it's not about the weather looks just right. Yeah, I'll go today. It's not, rather than it being an excursion for recreation. It's more like a survival skill. And not just a survival skill. What we're naming this, it's a thriving skill.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you and I have talked a lot about the story. I know it's probably in Samuel and in Kings, first or second Kings, but about King David when their camp gets raided. Their wives are missing, children are gone.
He's not with Israel. He's actually been rejected by the Philistines.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Not even king yet. And these loyal friends of his that he had built relationship with, they're turning on him and plotting, thinking about how they're going to kill him to deal with their emotions of feeling terrified and devastated that their loved ones are gone. And it says David strengthened himself in the Lord. And wow, he it doesn't go into detail about what he did, but it says David strengthened himself in the Lord. And I feel like that aspect of our relationship with God can often be overlooked. But oh boy, it's so huge. It's so huge.
And it was tested at that 4-month mark. But can you back up a little bit and tell me, maybe just briefly, when did you start developing that in your life? I mean, back before you married, when you were young, when did you start feeling like establishing, like you said before, I think the secret place, your history with God, establishing your history with God? I see it you could say it in lots of different analogies, of course, but like building your foundations in God,
Yeah.
the house upon the rock
Yeah.
type of thing. So when did you feel that was being built
So
in you
I
or
grew
starting?
I grew up with loving, super hardworking parents
Mm-hmm.
who raised me up in a Presbyterian church. But
Mm.
the church is very conservative, and conservative is okay. But what kind of creeped in were there are a lot of rules,
Yeah.
and so it was more about keeping up with wearing a necktie and your hair looking proper, and
Yeah.
you doing all the outward things that you're supposed to do.
Sure.
And people would say, "Oh, your son or your daughter,
It's looking good.
yeah, they're great, good Christians,
Yeah.
But if you wore jeans, I remember my friends who didn't have time to wear a t-shirt, they were looked down upon,
Mm.
and they were told, go make sure that they do better with God, and
Yeah.
that they're not backsliding.
Yeah.
Those are
Sure.
all these terms I grew up learning in this culture that I learned. But God kind of became just a kind of like a religion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just a story from a book,
Yeah.
an ancient book,
Mm-hmm.
stories from an ancient book about this being. And I never really ended up having a personal connection with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it became more like I went to this kind of Sunday activity thing where my parents were in meetings till really late and I was there all day. But at least I got to hang out with my friends.
Sure.
But that was all it was for me.
Hmm.
And so I started, but in my home there were a lot of broken things. Like my dad, he grew up in a really rough way. So even him and my mom, even not having the proper tools or skills
Mm-hmm.
to just have successful marriage and to be successful parents. For what they had and what they did, I just am thankful.
Yeah.
But I grew up with a lot of dysfunction, a lot of domestic violence in the home, a lot of just things that kids shouldn't probably grow up with. And so I could feel a vacuum in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a emptiness, a sadness, and kind of an anger as well. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And it was just always there.
Yeah.
Because I think there's no one there to help me process through what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
So I went to church, I went to school, I got good grades, got good marks at church. I think I was even the youth group president.
Yeah. You got marks at church. They gave you grades.
Yeah, some type
Stickers
of
on the chart or something.
like stickers on this chart. All those things, but I still felt this huge vacuum in my heart, like something is not okay in there.
Yeah.
But I better just keep up doing all these things that you're supposed to be doing that are supposed to be good, getting good grades, making sure people like you, making sure everyone at church thinks you're a good Christian.
Sure.
So it wasn't till when I went to college that I was helping at a church doing sound, and the people on stage, they had those wedge monitors,
Mm-mm. Yeah.
and they wanted it so loud, and I was trying to tell them I can't turn it any louder or else it's gonna cause feedback.
Yeah.
And we go woo, but they're like being pretty upset with me, saying, turn it up if we tell you to turn it up, because I was a freshman.
Yeah.
Like, listen to the upperclassmen. So I was like, all right. So I turned it up, and sure enough, whee! And they're even more upset, and they're like, and this is at church,
Sure.
And then so I turned it down, and then they asked me to turn it up, and then I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know why I did it, but I just ran away from the soundboard, and I ran upstairs to the church while the service is going. So now there's no one running sound, and there's worship going. The sound guy's gone.
Yeah.
And I was a young guy, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, one of my friends, he was a pastor there, finds me up there, and he's like, "Joe, what are you doing?" I go, I told him I didn't know how to handle it. They keep asking me to turn it up louder, and I keep telling them it's going to cause feedback, but they still want me to do it. And then I do it, and then they're upset with me. They're upset with me either way. Either way, there's no way I can win.
Right.
Someone's upset with me because I couldn't handle the situation where I couldn't please people.
Right.
Because I grew up pleasing people through grades, through sports, through church activities. So here I am now I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to please these people in this situation. So I'm going to run away because I don't know what to do. And this guy starts sharing with me like, you don't have to run away. Like, has anyone ever told you about the Father's love and the Father's heart? And I had never heard this before. And as he shared just the story of the prodigal son and about how God runs to me, and he's not a God who's just disappointed and angry and storming about me making mistakes.
Yeah.
He's like parading me and celebrating me and loving me. I just began to weep, and I didn't even know why I was crying. And the guy was even surprised, and he said, "Oh, wow." He's like, "Yeah, God loves you, Joe. And yeah, they're being mean and they're being difficult, but people are difficult, but you don't have to run. Like God's happy with you. Just do your best and they'll figure it out. You guys can all figure it out together, And I think that changed my life.
Wow.
And then so I felt that vacuum in my heart starting to get filled with the Father's love, knowing that that's what was been missing. Because I always felt like I had to work for it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then so when I received it as a gift and just as truth, no longer like trying to get it, but just or maintain it, maintain this love. Like God, I know God's pleased with me because I'm maintaining behavior that makes Him pleased with me. But it was just because of Jesus, I can come and there's no longer any separation.
Do you feel like that's a common experience in the church? I mean, you said you were raised in the church. I was too. I think a lot of missionaries probably who are living in Japan as missionaries
I feel like
have that background.
I definitely do. I feel like I easily could have stayed at the same church. Again, there's nothing like I want to say negative about that church. I appreciate so many things that they did and what they're still doing. But I could see myself being there still and even being a missionary from that church and still being on the mission field thinking I need to try super hard to be a good missionary and to please God through my mission work.
Sure. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard obviously in sort of private settings when you're talking and trying to find, okay, here's the fruit. You're dealing with some relational issue or some frustration or depression or anxiety issue, and you start to go a little deeper, and that whole thing of performance.
Yes.
So what do you reckon? What do you think in the sense that here we are in Japan, which is a super performance-orientated culture. Korean culture's really
very performance-oriented. Yeah.
And then maybe you come from a foreign
Presbyterian culture also.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was actually Presbyterian.
Yeah.
Originally when I
and for some reason the church I grew up in was very performance orientated. Yeah. And God bless the Presbyterian church.
Yep,
yeah.
absolutely.
And my parents still go to a Presbyterian church.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Love them.
Yeah. So
Is that a common thing you've found, like you've been in Japan and feeling, meeting people and relating, and have you seen that people struggling with that or?
Definitely. I feel like since we've come to Japan, we feel like the mission field has not just been with Japanese people. It's actually been to missionaries and just opening up our lives to give them permission to be human.
Yeah.
And
to be real,
to have struggles, to not have it all together, to be in process. I've had so many conversations with missionaries in Japan, maybe just as much as I had with the homeless in San Diego or people that were in the rescue mission about suicide.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe just as many conversations.
Wow.
Not from non-Christians, but from the missionaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, struggling with depression and with thoughts of suicide.
Wow.
And so, and myself included, fighting through this crazy, new atmosphere, spiritual atmosphere in Japan, and also feeling this heaviness and feeling depression too.
Yeah.
I think for almost a whole month, it felt like at one point.
Yeah.
And I remember even telling one of my friends who was the one at that time calling me often about his thoughts or of doing things to himself to hurt himself, telling him, "Oh man, I'm feeling depressed too, and I feel like a heaviness as well." And I remember the shock from that friend saying, "Really? Oh, almost like, but you're not supposed to. You're the person I'm
You're the
going
missionary.
to.
Yeah.
You're the one I'm going to get
Yeah.
help from. You're not supposed to be struggling with
Right,
this. You're supposed to be the strong one."
Sure.
And I had to say, "Oh no, I don't know if there are any strong ones. It's just Jesus,
Right.
and we all have to be here for each other."
Yeah.
And it's again giving people permission to be in process
Yeah.
and to be human,
Yeah.
and to know that you know, follower of Christ is exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Christian. It's
But
we're just following.
but to identify that tension, I think is really. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously in that relationship, his surprise or the person's surprise is kind of indicative of. Well, you have a role and you have a title, missionary or teacher or pastor.
Sure.
And in a culture like Japan,
Yeah.
that elevates that role.
Yes.
And of course, in the kingdom, it's not elevated.
Yeah.
We are all equal. We have different roles, tasks, and one of those might be leader, but it's not an elevation. But in these cultures, they are elevated, and so everyone's looking, and there's a huge risk of that. I mean, that friend was surprised, and maybe they were blessed. Wow, okay, you're human too. Wow, great.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is the fear that, oh, if I'm real, then these people are going to be disappointed in me. They're going to reject me or hurt me. Or,
Sure. Yeah. No, definitely. And my wife and I, we really wanted to make sure people knew, like, we will passionately pursue Jesus, and because he is worthy, and the fullness of joy is in his presence. Like we've turned our kitchen into like a place where we just worship daily, and we stream it sometimes to just remind people that we are a house of prayer. It's like, so, but we also want to remind people that's not because we're Superman and Superwoman, or because it's just because we need him. We need Jesus. We need to be in God's presence. We need to seek his presence. We need to prioritize that in our life, because it easily can get neglected behind ministry or behind activity. And we know ourselves, and we know we will not do well if we are just busy doing events and ministry, but we are not personally connecting with God. So even when people come over to our home, a lot of times we just make meals and we just hang out, because we even felt like on the mission fields, many missionaries just aren't given that luxury, that opportunity to just be with people. Rather than doing something like preaching or praying, or I don't know, doing some type of evangelism, but being given a meal and just laughing and being with people. We realize that is huge.
It is.
Yeah, just the ministry of hospitality. And so
place of belonging, eh?
Place of belonging. Yeah, actually, I just spoke with a really close friend of mine. He was originally a missionary in China. Now he's a missionary in Hong Kong. And he told me when he was in China, a lot of the missionaries would quarrel with one another, and they would struggle with a lot of depression and a lot of things that sounded so familiar to me. The quarreling, the judging other missionaries, the comparing yourself to other people, and I was like, oh my goodness, that sounds a lot like my experience in Japan, sadly. And he says Hong Kong is very different because there's been so many church plants that foreigners can plug into. He goes, I noticed that in Hong Kong, so many missionaries that end up being plugged into some type of community. They end up not having that time to think about what other people are doing, or to be jealous or judgmental. They're just busy doing the work.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I thought that was really fascinating. He says where the where the percentage of Christians was much lower and where the missionaries were fewer, and when there was less community, he saw that more commonplace. Like,
Right.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting.
And do you think that's also like Hong Kong's definitely had a lot more church foundation and
Yeah.
background? A larger percentage of the population is openly Christian.
Yes.
And of course, I'm not saying that heals all your problems. Obviously
No,
not.
definitely.
But do you think their spiritual atmosphere has a part to play in that?
I think so
Yeah.
too, for sure. And I think it's good for any missionary called to Japan or living in Japan right now to realize the need, the importance to pursue like healthy relationships with people here.
Yeah.
With either I don't know, local church or sending church, or just to not be too lone ranger.
Other believers in the area if possible. Yeah.
It's tricky. It's like it's a 100% dependence on Christ and Christ alone, not saying Jesus plus this person.
Sure.
But the Bible
God wants to
yeah
give to us through others. Yeah.
yeah the
and
Bible
share the
clearly
inheritance.
talks about the importance of us being a body,
Yeah.
and us honoring and valuing each part rather than saying, hey, it's all about the hand.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Look at those people who are all passionate about the feet,
Yeah.
Like, this is more important. No, he said to value each part and to flow together.
No, that's so good. And this is
so-
such a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
We've kind of got to the end of our first session. Well, I want to continue this conversation because I think you've got so much more to be able to share from your own experience and personal history about thriving in Japan. I'm just going to do, just for me personally, that one takeaway out of many things that you've shared is Christina feeling that it's so much better to just be in the center of God's will
Yes.
and living in life than looking on the outside like you're doing all the right things, pleasing people, but you're dying on the inside. Is that the wording? What was the wording she said?
Yeah. She said if we don't obey what God's telling us to do, we're going to slowly feel like we're dying on the inside. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes obeying what God's telling you to do might be rest. It might be like, stay in today and pray, or put on some worship music, or if you can play an instrument, seek God through worship, or journal, or go get some coffee. It might not look spiritual.
Take care of yourself. Yeah.
But whoa, yeah. But that I got an amen from the cat.
Yeah, there you go. Amen for the cat.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to carry on this topic in part 2. But
there you are. Huh?
Yeah, she is. Thanks for joining us today, and we will be back another time with Joe for part 2.
All right.
Good timing there, Chloe.
Hi.